A very warm welcome to you all at National School of Drama's 20th Bharat Mahotsav. We've gathered here today to witness World Theatre Forum's international seminar on new visual language in theatre from the perspective of scholars, practitioners, performers and pedagogues, and spectators. Before we begin the sessions, I call upon faculty member and cultural exchange program in charge of National School of Drama, Dr. Abhilash Pillai, to kindly make a brief introduction of the World Theatre Forum.
A very good afternoon to all our participants, invitees, guests, audience, and the industry for tuning. I am delighted to see you all here. After weeks of correspondence through our possible sources, mails, we are finally getting to see each other in person. It gives me immense pleasure to find myself with the privilege to welcome you all to the third World Theatre Forum. Let me give you an introduction about the cultural exchange program of National School of Drama and its activities before we proceed to the main session of the forum. The cultural exchange program activities of this initiative started functioning under a separate department in 2014. The program, the students, apprentice fellows, faculties and staff members from NSG have visited various countries and participated in the international theatre festivals and forums such as Asian Traditional Theatre Festival organized by the China, BRICS countries drama schools theatre festival organized by the University of Theatre Arts, Moscow, Russia, Sam Vanamaker Theatre Festival organized by Shakespeare's Globe, London, Asia, and then Asia Pacific Born Theatre School Festival. Apart from this, as part of the exchange program signed under the Memorandum of Understanding between its counterparts in various countries, the students, apprentice fellows, faculty and staff from NSG had visited Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, London, and Iceland University of Arts in Iceland. With a view to promote the academic activities, NSG had started organizing such allied activities as part of the Bharat Mahotsav. And I would like to begin by emphasizing upon the potent vision embedded within the idea of organizing this forum. The vision is to connect, to be present in each other's world of performance, be present in the gradual transformation of life, and thus in theatre. It is an attempt to bring out the oblivion from its isolation into the world. I believe that new ideas are emerging every day in the world. But I am afraid I might have to point out that the opportunities for academic intellectual exchanges are, on the contrary, increasingly reducing. If we at such junctions we manage to create platforms for exchange and evolutions, I am hopeful that it would lead to a collective enrichment of the theatre-making community in various aspects. NSG has organized the first World Theatre Forum with the title Breaking the Border in 2015 as part of the Bharat Mahotsav, an international theatre festival of India. There were speakers from Africa, Bangladesh, Germany, Norway, Nepal, New Zealand, and India. The exchange of views shared by renowned speakers had been well received by the student community and other theatre aspirants. In the second World Theatre Forum, the emphasis and focus was on topic rediscovering the magic of theatre. Theatre scholars and experts from New York, Singapore, Switzerland, Thailand, Afghanistan, Norway, Italy, Sri Lanka, UK, Armenia, Brazil, and India had attended this forum. After 2 years of gap, now we are going to organize the third World Theatre Forum titled New Visual Language in Theatre. For me, new visual language is the language that is emerging from the collaborative nature of theatre performances. In recent years, theatre directors' role in theatre making is being challenged. The productions are being devised collaboratively by the actors with the help of a team of experts from different mediums and technological interventions. And it is sometimes, or most of the time, a collaboration between different art and artists. New found spaces are being discovered. As the things like social media and virtual data are part and parcel of our daily life today, that is also influencing present visual language of theatre. And the people who are not part of this, knowingly or unknowingly, has become the part of the larger world of algorithm by AI tools, which most of the government and corporates have started using, and hence it has become much more important in the present scenario to discuss. In this forum here in 2 days, we are looking forward to discuss and explore the possibilities of understanding this new visual language of theatre with most of our agreements and disagreements. I have great hopes for these 2 eventful days of interaction, and we shall recreate such platforms in future as well to promote the international dialogue as well as exchange as often as possible in the near time to come. Again, I welcome you all to this forum. All the best. May each one of you here be present to innumerable moments of treasure, truth, and new possibilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We are indeed very fortunate to open this seminar with the keynote address by none other than Padma Shri Dr. Neelam Mansingh Chaudhary ji. I request the Senior Faculty of National School of Drama, Associate Professor of Acting, Ms. Hema Singh ji, to kindly escort Dr. Neelam onto the stage and felicitate her at the gathering. Hema Singh, a well-known actor, a graduate of NSD's Integrated Course 1982, has worked as an A-grade actress with NSD Repertory Company for 10 years. She has essayed at least 50 major roles under eminent national and international directors such as Ibrahim Al-Ghazi, Richard Schechner, B.P. Karan, K.N. Pannikar, Habib Tanveer, Om Shivpuri, B.M. Shah, Mohan Maharshi, Fritz Benevitz, Rodney Marriott, Amal Allana and Anuradha Kapur. She has also worked with eminent film directors such as Majid Majidi, Shyam Benegal and M.S. Sattu. In the field of direction, she has done innovative work in the field of Parsi theatre and presentation of poetry on stage. She has written analytical articles on theatre, has translated plays and was a theatre critic for Janasatta, a Hindi newspaper. She has taught voice and speech and acting at NSD, SRC, Madhya Pradesh School of Drama and Bhartendu Natya Academy. She has extensively travelled abroad, having performed and conducted workshops on theatre. She is a member of VASTA, Voice and Speech Trainers Association, and has taken master classes at VASTA, Singapore on the traditional Indian art of storytelling, actor, rasa, body and voice. Her portrayal of Imarti Devi in a TV serial has fetched her Indian Television Academy Award for the Best Actress. In 2008, she was awarded with NSD's prestigious Manohar Singh Smriti Award for her contribution to theatre. She is a recipient of Central Sangeet Natak Academy Award 2017 for her contribution in the field of theatre and acting. I request you, ma'am, to kindly give a brief introduction of the activities and events of the National School of Drama.
Thank you, Andhra, for your kind words. And here's some information about our institute, National School of Drama. National School of Drama, the only of its kind in India and one of the foremost theatre training institutions in the world, was established in 1959. It became an independent theatre institution in 1975, aegis of Government of India, Ministry of Culture. It imparts a comprehensive training in dramatic arts, leading to 3 years postgraduate diploma to the selected students from all over the country as well as abroad through a process of interview cum workshop. Over the years, the NSD has progressed on various fronts, including a rapid expansion of its activities in all parts of the country. It has produced a plethora of talented actors, directors, scriptwriters, designers, technicians, and educationists who has worked not only in theatre but in films and television also, winning several national and international awards. Training in the school follows a thorough, comprehensive, carefully planned syllabus which covers every aspect of theatre and in which theory is related to practice and all the work is ultimately put to test before the public. The syllabus takes into account methods of great theatre personalities who have shaped the contemporary theatre in all its variety of expressional forms. The objective of the NSD is to develop suitable patterns of teaching in all branches of drama, both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels, so as to establish high standards of theatre education in India. A systematic study and practice of Sanskrit drama, modern Indian plays, traditional Indian theatre forms, Asian drama and Western theatre gives the students a solid grounding and wide perspective in the art of theatre. The school has a repertory company and a theatre in education company in Delhi, and both are professional wings which regularly perform for theatre fraternity in regions of the country. Under consolidation of its outreach program, NSD has set up 4 regional centers at Agartala, Bangalore, Sikkim and Varanasi to impart teaching and training in dramatic arts of 1 year's duration. NSD's extension program seeks to extend and disseminate its activities in all regions of the country. A program for research, documentation and publication is a recent addition to strengthen the academic activities of the school. The school's publications include anthologies of plays in different Indian languages translated into English, referent works and theatre studies in Hindi. 21 years back, NSD organized its first international theatre festival called Bharat Rang Mahotsav in New Delhi in 1999, in which reputed theatre groups from India as well as from abroad participated with their productions. The festival is the event which attracts best theatre productions from all across the world, and it also gives an opportunity to the theatre lovers, practitioners, actors, playwrights, and others associated with theatre to exchange their views and ideas for the growth of theatre activities in the world. This year, 20th Bharat Rang Mahotsav is being celebrated in New Delhi between 1st to 21st February 2019 and in other 5 cities of the country, that is Dibrugarh in Assam, Rajkot in Gujarat, Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh, Ranchi in Jharkhand and Mysore in Karnataka. As a part of this international theatre festival, allied activities such as Living Legend series, seminars, masterclass, workshops, interaction session and theatre forum, including ambience performances, are also organized with a view to discuss various issues relating to theatre and its other allied arts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Neelam Mansingh Chaudhary has a master's degree in History of Arts as well as a diploma from the National School of Drama. In 1979, she moved to Bhopal and started working with the Rang Mandal, a theatre repertory attached to the multi-arts complex Bharat Bhavan. In 1984, she moved to Chandigarh, where she set up her own theatre group called The Company. Alongside The Company, she has also been teaching in the Department of Indian Theatre, Punjab University, and was also the chairperson. Her well-known plays include Kitchen Katha, The Suit, Yarma, Nagamandal, Little Yore, Bitter Fruit, and Naked Voices, to name a few. The group has participated in major national and international festivals. Dr. Chaudhary is a recipient of several awards, including the Sangeet Natak Academy Award in 2003 and the Padma Shri in 2011. She is presently Professor Emeritus at the Punjab University. Ma'am, we are extremely eager to witness the keynote address that you have in store for us today. Kindly elevate the gathering. You have the day.
Thank you. Yeah. Want to sit here? No, I think maybe if they can remove the computer. Is it possible?
Why don't you do it
Here? No, I'll do it here. It's fine.
Please, would you please, somebody,
If it can. Can you just close the lid? Okay, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm very grateful to Abhilash Pillai for considering me to share some ideas and thoughts with you. We are telling stories all the time. Our body tells a story. How we sit, how we walk, how we eat, how we interact, how we dress, all tell a story. As we grow up, we see films, hear each other's stories, and experience these stories. We make them our own experience and the experiences of those who listen and watch. Individuals in a clan or a family hand over stories, dances, songs, rituals in a tightly organized and monitored system of kinship with little or no deviations. But things started changing, as did the stories, when allowances for interpretation within even an oral system, creating new spins to old stories by including new occurrences in the world. The artist, the theatre artist, combines and edits materials that already exist in order to create something new. Every work of art bears references to another work. Everything that we do becomes a remix, processed and combined, that new stories and fresh ways of working are generated. All this can only happen if there is openness and curiosity. Over the years, the line between performance and life, art and everyday activity, between play and playing have become increasingly blurred. The journey to the production becomes part of the performance as well. Certain memories have stayed with me and impacted me, and what immediately comes to mind is Anuradha Kapur's play The Job by Bertolt where the artist Nalini Malani created proto-cinematic painted installations using revolving Mylar cylinders that loomed over the audience's head or came sometimes so near to become or feel almost confrontational. This became an entry, almost a preparation, a curiosity, an uncertainty into the performance space. Another play that I recall is The Drive, done by students of the National School of Drama, I think in 2011. The play provided for me one of the most powerful examples of audiences as witnesses, where individual booths were created on the stage and the audience walked on the stage almost as if they were in a marketplace or a zoo or just as voyeurs. The actors who were performing this piece had been asked by the director to observe the life of characters on the street, daily wage earners, policewomen, scooter drivers, and try to intuit their memories, fantasies, their eating habits, their fears, their dislikes, and create a character, action, create private moments by feeding it with their own life and making it their own, somewhere challenging our neat and tidy definitions of what creates theatre. The question that arose while watching these plays was, who was watching whom? Who was the performer and who was the audience? We do not just go to watch a play, but take ourselves to every show. This made me recognize that theatre does not exist in isolation, but always within a social, political, geographical, and even architectural context. In that context, what comes to mind is a play that I saw in London called Periodo Villa Villa from Argentina, where narrative seemed almost unnecessary when you had acrobatics, trippy music, indoor rainstorms, flashing lights, and a hail of plastic toys that didn't harm you in any way. Packed together in a tightly darkened chamber with a light that darts around, a paper ceiling, and actors harnessed from the ceiling, with the actors scooping down like vultures on unsuspected members of an 800 strong audience. And you find yourself somewhere in a breathtakingly different world, a cross between Mahotsav and Mad Max. When I saw this play in the 3 Mill Island studio, I was bewildered. It was an emotional sensation, with boxes within me being opened, walls being dissolved, and questions like, what is theatre, and what is theatre being pitted against? Taking theatre out of theatre buildings immediately changed the relationship of audience and performers, of making the audience participants, not just passive viewers. It also changed the relationship that the audience had with each other. Conventions, which had somewhere become dogmatic, making seeing habits part of the theatrical conventions, shifted when slides, projections, moving images, visual citations started being used in the theatre. How the relationship and text changed when the performance was displaced from the expected space to a space where sometimes the actors sprang from amongst the audience or spoke directly to a member of the audience, leading to fresh configurations. Especially in the early 90s, when most of us going to the theatre involved sitting in neat rows in the dark, as often as not on plush pushback chairs, and hardly acknowledging the presence of strangers with whom we sat shoulder to shoulder, certainly never expecting the actors to invade our space or dreaming that we could claim theirs. Somewhat, this made me recognize that things were changing, and also that rules are there to be broken, and that the fourth wall can be battered down, even in the case of traditional and classical texts. The experience of watching Abhilash Pillai's Midnight's Children comes to mind. The show starts outside the audience, and the audiences are invited inside and exposed to a feeling of being in a bioscope, a collage of iconic sites and structures from around the world. The visual action and the live action seems to run parallel to each other. Again, in Deepak Shivaraman's The Legend of Kasak, set in a massive field where the audience surround the play, or should I say, embrace the play. An actor invites a member of the audience to measure him for a shirt, and when few members of the audience are served mapilla food, you can almost smell the coconut oil in which the chicken and the eggs have been boiled. The talcum and the powder sprayed during the marriage procession wafts across to the audience, sucking them into the smells of the performance, while the spirit soars and toddy flows, as do our emotions. In Kitchen Katha, a play that I made in 2000, which was about food and cooking and storytelling, just to go a little back, having spent a major part of my childhood in a langar or a community kitchen, due to my grandparents who lived in the family Gurdwara in Chandigarh, which they got as compensatory land when they came from Rawalpindi as part of the whole exodus when India became Pakistan in India. I experienced in the Gurdwara, the Gurdwara experience of community eating made me recognize food as ritualized sharing. While making the play, I recognized the nature of a theatre audience as a community where the politics of food, rampant in our traditional context, was swept away and eating was democratized. Live eating on stage with a sound plan created by pounding, grinding, and the clatter of utensils, and recipes as songs designed by B.V. Karant and the lyrics written by Sujit Patar, a very famous Punjabi poet, connected food to storytelling and the creation of a visual language that came from the world of eating and sharing. Huge gunny bags filled with wheat and grain, industrial qualities of food, thousands of dough balls, sorry for the slippage, made in the community kitchen were all part of my visual memory.
chopping, pounding, washing and cooking, with a pomegranate being smashed and its juice flowing, a papaya being scooped, an actor covered with flour turning into a white column becomes images by opening doors to other ways of conveying meaning. It called for ambiguity and allowed the audience to put their own meaning into the performance. The simple act of peeling an onion, for instance, is the perfect subterfuge for some quiet tears, says the protagonist in the play. What was happening that even while working with the pre-existing texts like Federico Garcia Lorca or Jean Racine or Girish Karnad, one tried to develop an individual relationship through a reworking of the given text. The beginning, middle and end of a well-made play could, I realized, be reassembled, reconstituted and shuffled. Words were not given the kind of power that I was trained to believe in, with the memorizing of the text being an imperative before the actor came on the stage. Many people believed, as I did, that theatre is a place where an actor recites a written text, illustrating it with a series of movements and actions in order to make it understood. Interpreted this way, theatre became an accessory to dramatic literature. But for me, ideally, the play is a beginning and not an end to interpretation. Through the work that I was exploring, I recognized that we must not have a form which is fixed forever. It evolves because of the actors and the audiences. A text for me is really dead when there's an absence of exchange, a kind of a closure. In other words, a text becomes dead when it does not travel, evolve and change. A playwright, as we know, is the historian, the poet, the metaphysician. However, once a play has been written, it has a life of its own which goes beyond the intentions of the playwright, but comes alive differently in the mind of the director and in the body of the actor. Since the last couple of years, written plays are not suited exactly for what I'm searching for. At the present time, it's a, I would say, instinctive rejection, not a judgment. In the absence of a pre-established text, it's always difficult to decide when a production is over. When you move in undefined spaces, one thing that you recognize that this form of working is not as free as you thought it would be. Gradually, one notices that as one is working, one is constantly chiseling, making choices, erasing, adding, faltering. With this change also came a change in subject matter when large events and the spectacular were replaced by the quotidian. There was a shift from an issue-based theatre with kings and noblemen to the mysteries of the everyday, representing ordinary life as poetic and relevant and as meaningful material for dramatic narration. From water being boiled to food being cooked, washing of clothes or chickens running around a courtyard, domestic images making the material you work with beyond their ordinary possibilities to see the familiar, the everyday transformed. To see in the little parts of life an importance equaling those climatic events that are usually associated with high drama. In Nali Wali Ladki, Anuradha Kapur and Deepan Shivaraman's scenography created a startlingly visual language, combined with a text that had a sense somewhere of the agitprop theatre, but took it to a level where the text and its relationship to the body becomes also a search for the contemporary body, combined with the contemporary text. An old printing press that slowly seems to become a metaphor for civil obedience, along with a set that rolled in and out, changing, transforming from a village to a gutter to a pond where everyone comes to bathe. Images that appear in the beginning fairly sedate and harmless, suddenly as they roll back and forth become objects of fear, anger, brutality and torture. Most stories that Anuradha Kapur directs are not always pre-given. It may resonate with a concern if the story already exists. Sometimes, just as an idea or an image, can trigger a desire to read a particular kind of text and then rework it, reassemble it, reclothe or unclothe it through the body of the actor. I think for a lot of us, most of the work that we are creating really starts with improvisation, which then becomes a common language of the workspace. Certain suggestions that are both physical and conceptual, as well as certain objects and actions, are given to the actor, and the context is suggested. Sometimes the actor produces something entirely different from what may have been suggested, and sometimes what he pulls out is a fully realized idea, and sometimes just a sketch or a moment that can very often invariably be pulled out and fed into the main performance. For example, a tray of water can suggest a river, a burnt car, a genocide, or a tinsel cloth, a snake. In this way of working, the same significance is given to each participant in the making of a production. The human body and the spoken word can be on the same footing as the gesture and the prop. In the course of my work, I have recognized that creation can be collective only when everyone ensures maximum creativity in each function, but someone centralizes it. I don't think in this kind of system the role of the director is diminishing, but I think the actor's responsibility is increasing. I think the role of the actors will always remain fundamentally different from mine, but the dialogue or the conversation becomes equal, like the dialogue between two people fulfilling different functions. As a director, I do recognize that I am the only person in the group that does not make or create anything in the physical sense of the word. Qualities like perception, discrimination may be more developed, as I do not have the constraints of those who are the instruments of creativity, which is the actors with their bodies, structures, materials, objects, props. Whatever an actor does on the stage must be done in actuality. When they write a letter, they must not just scribble randomly, but actually write the letter and write the words which are meant to be written at that point of time. When they read, they must actually read. When they cook on the stage or drink tea, it must be real food, real tea, and not a simulated action in simulated time. I have always felt that when the action is played truthfully, then somehow there's a chance of the emotions to also have a ring of truth. How material behave on stage, how mud and actors create transformations. Materials also become my actors, not that they can in any way ever substitute for what it means to be an actor. They extend the meaning of the narrative, articulate sometimes that which becomes difficult to articulate, and transfer simple everyday objects to the level of metaphor, and also sometimes just for sheer stage business. Could this be described as an insistence on realism? I would actually call it an insistence on truth, which I think is the opposite of realism. Realism for me is facts, and facts for me really are nothing. There is hardly a theatre production without a story. Even when we talk about a catastrophe, about pain, about the darkness of the human condition, the very fact that we are performing it already shows the existence of hope. It is impossible to do theatre if one is not conscious of it. Most of my recent work for the last 6-7 years has been based on migration, loss, fractured identities, dark and brooding stories. But within that, I have an imperative need for affirmation. Tiny little gestures of assertion, a song being sung, a forgotten game from childhood being played, cooking and sharing of food. Hope, humanity and compassion has to glimmer through no matter how savage the situation may be. When I directed plays like Fedra by Jean Racine or Yerma by Federico Garcia Lorca or Stri Patra by Rabindranath Tagore, I had to bring the play to the present moment, to bring the characters in a context in which they might unfold and reveal the stories of mankind. Also, I need to locate my play in a world that I understand, in the world that I'm going through, and the world of the actors. It has to be nativized, regionalized, without, I hope, disturbing in any way the basic essence of the narrative. Is it the present? Is it a historical moment of the past? Is it an imaginary country or society? Because each play, at least a classical play, carries a baggage of their own histories, interior context becomes the issue that needs to be explored. The story need not communicate to any immediate dilemma within me or what the world is undergoing. As often we do yearn in a space like theatre, in an artistic space, we yearn for the fantastic, the imaginary. Yet, can that imaginary world exclude the realities that we are surrounded by, the dark forces that threaten our existence, our safety, our freedom? The work of young directors have been very inspiring for me, and I think for a lot of us who have seen their work. People like Abhilash Pillai, Deepan Shivaraman, Parveen Gunjan, Rajendra Panchal, Kumar Das, Amitesh Grover, Gino Joseph. The list is certainly not complete. They show no fixed storyline or timeline for the events to transpire. They are brave and they tell us life is terrifying and imperfect, and it's only when we face these imperfections truthfully we can aspire for hope. Theatre, as we all know, is not necessarily a cozy space designed to make us feel good. We stick around because it reminds us of the wonders and passions that we have for the world but may have lost or forgotten. Theatre keeps holding out hope for a shared space in a segregated world. Public life in the age of privatization. It invites us to enter into a space of the unspoken, the unspeakable, and helps us to reimagine reality. Not just as an idea, but something we can touch, feel, smell, and taste. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an enlightening and empowering keynote address. We are highly grateful to you for having spared your valuable time for this session. I request Senior Faculty of National School of Drama, Hema Singh ji, to kindly present a token of love to Dr. Neelam on behalf of National School of Drama. Thank you, ma'am. May you now kindly proceed and have a seat in the audience. Our first panel discussion on visual language from the point of view of scholars will be chaired by Dr. Anuradha Kapur. Ameet Parameswaran, Professor Ashish Sengupta and Mariana Wainstein shall form the panel and put forth their perspectives. Dr. Anuradha Kapur is a former director, National School of Drama, New Delhi, where she was also professor for acting and direction. She is a theatre maker and a teacher and is considered one of the leading theatre practitioners of India. Her writings have been widely anthologized, and her book, Actors, Pilgrims, Kings and Gods, The Ramleela of Ramnagar, was published by Seagull Books, Calcutta in 1993, the second edition in 2004. She has taught and directed in India and abroad, and most of her directorial work had been in collaboration with painters and visual artists Among her acclaimed productions are Gora, Umrao, The Job, Sundari, An Actor Prepares, Virasat, etc. She is one of the founder members of Vivadi, an informal working group of painters, musicians, writers and theatre practitioners, which was formed in 1989. In 2003, she was invited to curate the performance Window Actors at Work at Body.City, an event citing contemporary Indian culture at the House of World Cultures, Berlin. She was co-curator of the theatre segment at Serendipity Festival 2016 and 17. In 2004, she was conferred with the Sangeet Natak Academy Award. We welcome you, ma'am. Ameet Parameswaran is currently Assistant Professor in Theatre and Performance Studies, School of Arts and Aesthetics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. His articles have been published in journals such as Theatre Research International, Performance Research and TDR, and his monograph titled Performance and the Political, Power and Pleasure in Contemporary Kerala was published in 2017 by Orient Black Swan. We welcome you, sir. Professor Ashish Sengupta is Professor English at the University of North Bengal, India. He is a recipient of the Olive Reddick Award 1995, Fulbright American Studies Institute Fellowship 2002, Fulbright Visiting Professorship 2006, and SAS NET Guest Lecturer Grant 2009, and has published numerous essays and chapters on South Asian and American theatre performance in journals of international repute. His edited volume, Mapping South Asia Through Contemporary Theatre with Palgrave Macmillan in 2014, has been hailed as the first cross-national study of theatre in the region. His most recent publication is Islam and Performance from Bloomsbury Methuen, London, 2017. We welcome you, sir. Mariana Wainstein from Uruguay has been a theatre director and producer since 1992. She is the director of several public and private cultural development projects in Uruguay. She is the coordinator of the Feria de Artes Escénicas de 33 Arts Market Fair in Uruguay, and artistic director and producer of the Festival Internacional de Teatro Unipersonal de Uruguay, International Festival of Monologues. For the last 6 years, she has been studying the influence of theatre in politics. She did BA in Theatre Arts from University of Tel Aviv, Israel, Masters in Democratic Leadership and Political Communications from Universidad Complutense de Madrid, and Masters in Advanced Studies of Political Communication from Faculty of Information Sciences, Universidad Complutense de Madrid. We welcome you, ma'am. I invite the chair, Dr. Anuradha Kapur, and the panelists, Ameet Parameswaran, Professor Ashish Sengupta, and Mariana Wainstein, to come onto the stage and take their places.
Please come, sit, have a seat.
We are very eager to listen to what each one of you shall put forth. I request Dr. Anuradha Kapur to kindly begin the session. Ma'am, you have the days.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. But as the moderator of a session, I will actually only be looking at time and hearing very intently. So it's a great pleasure to be here to hear many views and many possible discussions on what is the theatre. I would request you to keep to 20 minutes, and what we will do then is take over the discussion at the end of the presentations, so we can have a series of ideas that we can all think through. Thank you. And
Thank you so much, Professor Abhilash Pillai and the NSD organizing team to call me here. And it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a very tough act to speak after the keynote that we heard. It's a wonderful keynote.
आप हिंदी में कह सकते हैं? बोलने नहीं आ रहा मुझे.
Actually, no. I'm from Kerala. I don't. Not. I understand parts of it, but not necessarily able to communicate in Hindi. Yeah. So what I'm doing here is part of my larger work. One part of my larger work, where I look at and the question of new visual language in theatre is extremely complex because of the pluralities and multiple practices that are there across the country, across diverging tendencies of theatre, and which kind of have their own genealogies and even perform their own genealogies. And what I've been looking at recently in my work, in the book and later, has been the larger question of neoliberalism and performance as seen from the site of Kerala. And while Kerala as a state itself is configured around, say, the question of language, Malayalam, the performances that I've analyzed are generally what trouble the category of region itself, often offering us new geographies of imagination, experience, especially at the level of senses. Now, and I've worked across a range of performances, whether it be Katha Prasango, Mimics Parade, or theatre, or visual poetry, poetry recitals, etc. Today, for the question of visual language in theatre, especially I kind of focus on one tendency within theatre, and of the people that I've worked with, and all whose work I've looked at, such as Abhilash Pillai, Deepan Sivaraman, Shankar Venkateshwaran, etc., who have come from Kerala, who kind of work, who can, as I said, trouble the question of geography itself. And I look at them as a tendency, in the tendency where the question of language, especially the question of visuality, has a certain kind of centrality. Now, on one hand, their work seems to be so radically different, and their approach to language in each production seems to be also quite distinct. Say, for instance, from almost like no use of words and completely cutting off spoken language to using 2 or 3 languages continuously, giving each a different tone and texture, such as in circus, the Talatum, or in the work that I'm going to actually look and focus more today, which is Khasak and Itihasam, which is Deepan Sivaraman's work, where question of language is also very, very closely aligned with, as we will see, with the text itself, one of the iconic landmark text, and the language kind of works with that quite a lot. And these are very, very different, radically different ways of approaching language. Yet, there is something about the question of language and visuality that I would like to focus. And as a kind of starting point, the caveat itself, I would say, to even approach a question of visual language, and the term language is significant, I would start by saying something slightly older perspective, but which is quite significant to be reiterated, which is Marvin Carlson's perspective of heteroglossia in stage language. Carlson argues that one needs to approach language as, quote, a social construction, and that languages on the stage, as elsewhere, are recognized and coded as languages by their employment of features culturally related to that construction, rather than the question of comprehension or non-comprehension. Carlson moves away from simply folding culture to language, as he works through James Clifford's broader perspective to conceptualize stage language as involving cultures. With expanded communication and intercultural influence, people interpret others and themselves in a bewildering diversity of idioms, a global condition Mikhail Bakhtin calls heteroglossia. Carlson argues that in citing this usage, Clifford quotes Bakhtin's comment that heteroglossia assumes that languages do not exclude each other, but rather intersect with each other in many different ways, adding that what is said of languages applies equally to cultures and subcultures. It is in this framework of question of language that I will look at the question of visuality also as a mixed sort of stage language that I will look at, and I particularly focus on that one production which Professor Neelam Mansingh also referred to, which is Khasak and Itihasam, directed by Deepan Sivaraman in 2015, and which has been done in different towns and city centers in Kerala as well as other parts of the country. And the work, it was done with the KMK Smaraka Kala Samiti, based on the small town of Trikadipur. And I interrogate the complex stage language of the production as an instant of what Andy Lavender has termed as, quote, theatres of engagement, showing how a new heteroglossic language of the stage opens out a geography of contemporary experience. Now, the novel itself, Itihasam, Khasakinde Itihasam, is often regarded as really one of the most iconic landmark novel, almost dividing the Malayalam language into two, as one before and after, also novel of the century, etc. And it's modeled on a village called Tasarak in North Kerala, and creates it as almost like a kind of nowhere land in the context of newly independent nation following a developmentalist path under Nehruvianism. The novel opens when the protagonist Ravi, who's coming to Khasak as a person in charge of a single teacher school and an external student of astrophysics. He has left his studies to kind of come and sort of serve this state, and he's dropped out of it. Using the trope of Ravi's journey, an encounter of this fantasy village of Khasak as an outsider, the novel, following a non-linear narrative strategy, presents a world of Khasak, which, as the writer M. Mukundan points out, broke away from socialist realism, a style that used to have a powerful hold on Malayalam literature at that point. Mukundan highlights that in Itihasam, stark realism permeates the village, the characters and the language. But beneath the realism lie the magic of imagery. It's about the life in the countryside with realist characters, with overarching rainbow of spirituality, punctuated by ceaseless self-interrogations. In the last analysis, therefore, Mukundan concludes, it's a story of a distant village, mired in local myths and legends, gathered in an urban place. And this is a kind of a theorization very strongly generally about modernism in Kerala also, in sort of insider-outside question. Thereby, the novel opens out a new geography of the nation, foregrounding polyphony of languages, beliefs, and ritualistic practices, especially concentrating on the practices of two communities of Kerala. One is Irava, a lower caste Hindu community, and Rautas, which is one kind of Muslim community. Now, having an ensemble of more than 30 people, the theatrical adaptation can be seen as part of the emergent tendency, which I kind of marked at the start, where a certain kind of investment with new spaces and a certain kind of sensory experience is sort of foregrounded, using whether it be natural elements like fire, water, earth, alongside live music, video projections, puppetry, etc. The 3-hour open-air performance of Itihasam, for instance, was originally performed in Trikkaripur to the backdrop of a peepal tree with seats erected for audience on 3 sides, with center space consisting of mud. It stages diverging ritualistic practices presented in the novel, such as oracles and preachers, using varied Islamic prayers and chanting, including the azan, and the non-mainstream but popular practices such as rituals to drive the jinns away, or the very extremely popular North Kerala ritual of Theyyam. It also involves puppetry, recorded video projections, pre-recorded video projections of animations, footages of alternate scapes of interaction between characters in the performance, as well as abstract images. Now, the aesthetic of Itihasam, even as it works with the novel, sets out a space foregrounding multifarious cultural practices outside the urban geography of India, presents a radical move away from what is termed as care of the roots in the post-independence period, drawing on the concept of hybridity from Homi Bhabha and putting forward binary of Indian and colonial. The theatre scholar Erin B. Mee, for instance, frames Theatre of the Roots as a complex project that involves a deliberate failure to decolonize, according to her. In her close analysis of practice of significant director K.N. Panikkar from Kerala, Mee develops the formulation by reading Panikkar's performances as distinct from and against naturalism, as also indigenous performances. Mee highlights that Panikkar's work is primarily, quote, performance-driven theatre, where one can see a conscious move away from both playtext and the centrality of plot. As Erin B. Mee argues that Panikkar's aesthetic lays stress on multiple meanings opened out by the performance through varied elaborations of a theme, where question of, quote, how something happens is more critical than what happens. Mee highlights the role of non-linguistic aspects of performance in Panikkar's work, especially the use of body movements derived from Kadalipayattu rhythms, percussion and music for communication of emotion. She argues that these practices involve proscenium stage deposition against both naturalism and indigenous performances, because, say for instance, estual of quote-unquote real transformation, and they produce therefore a deliberate failure to decolonize. Now, the aesthetics of Itihasam, on the other hand, without foregrounding a binary of the colonial Indian, posits a globality of contemporary experience in a space such as Kerala. And the visual languages in the earlier movement also had quite critical that the visual language of the theatre of the roots as framed by me is also quite critical. And yet, an experience what the production of Khasak would highlight need to be seen in slightly different global trajectory of what, say, Hans Thees Lehmann has famously termed as post-dramatic theatre. Lehmann focuses on the change in conventional hierarchical relationship between text and theatrical sign in the contemporary performance, arguing that the step to post-dramatic theatre is taken only when the theatrical means beyond language are positioned equally alongside the text and are systematically thinkable without it. He argues that, quote, rupture in post-dramatic theatre, unquote, unlike early intervention, is that it does not, quote, cling to the presentation of a fictive and simulated text cosmos as a dominant. Foregrounding the centrality of musicalization and visualization of performance, he further highlights that, quote, within the paratactical, de-hierarchized use of signs, post-dramatic theatre established the possibility of dissolving the logocentric hierarchy and assigning dominant role to elements other than the dramatic logos and language. Now, I'll just play a very short clip from Khasak, just to see this, the opening sequence of Khasak, quite widely discussed and kind of thought out even in Kerala itself, in a lot of Malayalam reviews. This is the opening sequence, as like you said, the spirit sort of coming from behind, and quite widely discussed also because of the framing, that it offers a peculiar new framing for the story or narrative, if you want to call it, wherein almost what you can see as a theatrical means beyond language is sort of highlighted. Unlike the novel that starts with the protagonist arriving and getting down from a bus to the village of Khasak, the performance starts with this sort of setting up of a mythological genealogy of Khasak, which is narrated much later in the novel. Now, the Malayalam reviewers have marked this opening of sequence as critical reinterpretation of the novel. For instance, K.P. Jayakumar highlights a scene and argues that through these appearances of spirits of the people who have died, Itihasam, and I quote, constructs an illusory world or parallel world of self-expression, unquote. He argues that they are people who tell their biography from the end of what was said, from the end of what was seen, beyond this world, from nether world. What is being highlighted can also be seen in a formal theatrical sense as displacement of plot structure in post-dramatic theatre as theorized by Lehmann, where, quote, present is registered as appearance. And as Lehmann would say, the present is a floating, fading presence, which at the same time enters experience as, quote, gone or afoot, as an absence, as an already leaving, and crosses out dramatic representation. While the world of Khasak seems to emerge in this sort of appearance, out of this sort of non-dramatic manner, unlike Lehmann's perspective, the world, or in fact the cosmos of Khasak, is still very significant for the adaptation. For instance, and this has been also kind of quite noted by the reviewers. For instance, one of the reviewers, Ragesh, in his review highlights that rather than approaching the place Khasak through the perspective of the protagonist Ravi, which is what the novel does, who has quote, left behind home, father and his beloved to come to Khasa, the performance sidelines the protagonist Ravi itself to foreground the place itself, Khasa itself as the protagonist. Now this is the reviewer's comments. Now, while this sort of what does it mean to have a place as a protagonist in a production? And what does that reinterpretation make to us? And what is the cosmos of Khasa, therefore? While the use of space, for instance, is very celebrated in the production for its unique impact at the level of senses, what is also striking is the stress on the figures as the performance developed more or less all prominent figures of the novel, with each having at least one moment of intensity. And this might be the reason why in certain performances in certain parts of the city, certain parts of Kerala, the performance were welcomed by murals of these characters which are painted outside, and performance which would kind of embody them later. Now, the aesthetic, while seemingly impacting at the level of senses to provide a unique experience, does not erase the original text. Andy Lavender argues that even as some contemporary performances foreground, quote, eventness, they could equally entail heightened experiences of dramatic mediation. For Lavender, the shift towards eventness and a simultaneous swing away from mimesis, narration and representation that layman imagined might not have been necessary direction that contemporary performance practices took, as he highlights how certain performances, quote, depend structurally on the coherence provided by texts and intertext in presenting their own no less cogent worlds. Lavender argues that, quote, they stage scenes of mimetic representation, albeit framed overtly within an evental production. While there is an emphasis on the, quote, process of viewing and an openness by the way of their multi-perspectival mode, there is also a drive to closure and a conclusion. In these instances, the production is rendered as a complete entity, a finished result. If these works are post-dramatic, they are so in a way that recuperates dramatic. And I will just show one or two kind of points from the production to kind of to see what that dramatic mediation and that what as theatre of engagement, which actually recuperates dramatic or a cosmos of Kasak, also does very different in the contemporary moment. One of the striking aspects of the novel itself was its use of language, and that is what is most celebrated of the novel, where a single language is inflected with power and location of the speakers. While Ravi and, say for instance, Ravi and upper caste, Madhavan Nair speaks in formalized, standard Sanskritized Malayalam, all other characters in the novel speak in a mixture of Malayalam and Tamil, indexing a localized community status for its speakers. And the narrator that we saw, we heard in the sequence that we shown. So, rather than considering the performance as monolingual, it is important to look at the polyphony at play. Now, so the multiple cultures that one see in Itihasam, including the mainstream ritualist practices of Rautas and Iravas and black magic, etc., and localized beliefs, the performance, their intensity gets amplified as the varied rituals and practices are staged with a duration, sometimes often one after the other in immediate succession. The adaptation of the world of heteroglossia raises complex questions of comprehension. To whom does the world of heteroglossia become accessible? Is it to an audience who are deemed to be natives living under conditions of heteroglossia, or is it accessible to an audience outside the context? While the novel itself is often said that it is so located and culturally located that its translation doesn't work, what the virtual world of the performance does is it to kind of place it in a different sort of globality, and what we see as projections and the abstract worlds that are constructed in the production kind of offer us that. Because what it transforms us as an aesthetic is to kind of de-link certain notions of rituals and beliefs and practices as located authentic with certain communities, almost pre-globalization, to kind of mark that this continuous world from ritual, superstition, beliefs, which are spectacularized under conditions of globalization, after, say, the Gulf boom in Kerala, where rituals have become, as Osella and Osella has shown, identity articulations, particularly of lower caste assertions who had gone to Gulf, paid back money, and kind of invest in temple festivals, etc. So that this becomes a continuous world, also a conflictual world between these sort of cultures. And therefore, the role of that visuality and a particular aesthetic of what I call theatres of engagement offers a very different world than from the original Khasak, which is a novel, to a kind of contemporary cosmos of Khasak, which sort of responds, captures, and locates the experience of the contemporary. Thank you.
अनुराधा जी वो जो लोग गा रहे थे ना, जो उन्होंने बोला उसको थोड़ा सा आप हिंदी में सबको बता दीजिए।
So maybe when we have a discussion at the end, then हम बात कर सकते हैं।
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very much thankful to Dr. Abhilash Pillai and his colleagues and the organizing committee of this World Theatre Forum at NSD for giving me, thank you, this opportunity to come here and participate in the discourse. I can appreciate the problem of language. I'm extremely sorry. As Ameet said, I do understand Hindi, but I cannot, rather do not, right? Do not take me in the wrong sense. Because grammatically, truly, lexically, it's do not, cannot. Because I cannot read Hindi, then I'm willing not to read it or speak it. The title of my presentation is Towards the Optic, as you find there, and the changing language of theatre in India. I would just request you not to take it as from the semantic to the optic, because in this new visual language, there are very much the text, the actor, everything, but only a reorganization, as Neela Mansingh pointed out in her brilliant keynote address. Simply will reorganize these elements today interact in a different way, in a mutually, place of exchange, mutual exchange, you can say. Why this question? I mean, new visual language. Something must have happened in between, and that directly involves our notion of the real. First of all, whenever we refer to the real, this real we find in the world outside the stage, which we call external reality. How do you perceive it? How do you engage with it? Is this reality determinate to us today? Or is this real indeterminate to us? Or is there a space in between this determinate and indeterminate real in the space outside? And how do I mean, this is much of a problematic issue these days. How do I bring that real onto the stage? How do I play that real on the stage? By raising or creating an illusionist mimetic theatre, a space where the real is both real in terms of performance and unreal in terms of its correspondence to the real outside. Now, if I am really wanting my audience to believe it to be real, that this is almost a protocopy or this is almost a reproduction of that real, and then if I want my audience to react to it directly, that look, I have given you a comprehensive, a truthful idea of the real as it is in the outside world, then there are issues. Why? Because what do I do here? One member or a few members in the audience may ask me, do you pretend to produce the real? Do you pretend to do the real in its direct correspondence to the real outside? This is one issue. And you refer to Lehman. I'm not directly referring to Lehman, but Lehman had that problem before him as well. And this way of looking at the real outside and that way of engaging with that real in the performance page or on the stage actually radicalizes a relationship which Nila Mansi, once again I refer to her, pointed out in her address. This radically changes the position or the relationship between the actor on stage and the audience in the auditorium, right? Because the fourth wall may not work anymore. So, how is this engagement? What is the nature or the character of this engagement, of this radical changes to the relationship between stage reality and not the external reality, but the perceiving audience? That is number 2. And if you look at the etymology of theatre, all of you know, this is common knowledge, that this derives from the ancient Greek theatron, which means a place for viewing. My accent is on viewing. But our understanding of theatre mostly has been an understanding of dramatic theatre. The dramatic theatre which we traditionally had never done, because dramatic theatre came much later. A performance or a production centered on and around a play text written before the performance, written and primarily made for being performed on the stage. So I'm not referring back to the so-called classical or traditional pre-dramatic or pre-colonial performances, right? You know them. Maybe in many of them there are no words even. The text in many of them was not there at all. It was all body, all the gesticulation, articulation of the body, and it was all movement. Together with that all, once again, scenography. Scenography, I'll come to that a little later. But how do I look at once again, the relationship? That is what bothers me, obsesses me sometimes. The relationship between that written text and the performed text. Because the world has its own demand. Do I want to keep close to the written text very much as the playwright would like me to? And I refer to this incident in Trishul 2, that Arthur Miller moved court for the Worcester Group's adaptation of a line or a sentence from his The Crucible. Today, we do not have any such playwrights, right? Because the conception of the notion of playwriting has changed altogether. So, the relationship between the written text and its performed image has more often been confrontational than harmonious, I would say. Because what I do here on the stage is the performance text, and the written text may not be absolutely in conjunction with it. So, if the performed text is a directorial interpretation of that written text, then theatre has at the same time challenged the logos. Ameet has already done that for all of us, so I'm not rehashing it. And you have got to understand that there are tectonic shifts in linguistic theories between the 1960s, right, and the 1980s, still an old story to us. In performance theory, in literary theories, so we cannot ignore any of them, because as students of literature, as literature department, or as students of performance studies, as students of theatre studies, and I would like to also mention that theatre studies is theatre studies. It may share borders with performance studies, but the disciplinary boundaries have not, beyond a certain extent, not collapsed, I reassure you, not collapsed at all. Performance is one thing, performance art, concept art, these are different things altogether, right? The light may be real, the blood may be real, the body may be real, or I sit here with my clothes on, you know what production I refer to in an implied sense, and you come and you can just chop off my clothes, you know, my dress piece by piece, and I sit on. Now come to visual art, because scenography basically relates to visual art, and scenography is as old as theatre. Isn't there scenography in Ram Leela? Isn't there scenography in the realist, naturalist, at times even modernist articulation or interpretation of Tughlaq's, British Karnak's Tughlaq as produced by the legendary Ibrahim Al-Ghazi in the Purana Kila? Isn't there scenography in Ratan Thyam's theatre? Of course, but only scenography keeps functioning or operating in diverse way depending on time. We cannot ignore, most humbly I submit, the demands of the time and the character of the time, the character of the changing, fast changing character of the space that we all are situated in. That is another point. So theatre, but this scenography more or less was a scenic interpretation in the form of a scenic illustration of the written text. Nothing, not much more than that. But if we refer to Europe, since we are doing world theatre, I may not limit myself to Indian productions, but if you refer to Europe or even to the United States, you have referred to Lehman once again, the de-hierarchization of signs, because the sign, the signifier, and the signifier, the relationship became problematic as early as Ferdinand de Saussure, and that was more problematized by way of challenge, by bringing more elements of arbitrariness into the relationship by the post-structuralists, as you know. So when you work with the text, you also have got to question yourself, how do I read that text? How do I read that text as a reader? And then how do I put that text to performance as a director? You cannot ignore any of these issues. But in this scenography, you see, in a theatre of scenography evolved gradually. As early as the 1970s, and it had its heyday in the 1980s, Europe and the US, there has been a recent tendency of a return to the text. Because if you refer to Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle, there was too much of spectacle. So they are trying to return to the text. But when you return to the text is no longer a sacred text. A text is no longer a non-problematic or unproblematic text that you presume to be a piece where you can decipher a meaning from every word, from every line, or from the relationship between the words and between the sentence and between the pages. No. So the theatre of scenography sought to understand if we can have visual dramaturgy, not by making the other elements or aspects of theatre subservient to the word, but democratizing the space, making text or the other elements the other way around as important as the text. And let's see how they, in the mutual relationship between themselves or among themselves, how they behave, what they speak when I put the word in conjunction or in transaction with a visual, right? That visual can be an autonomous text, that visual can be a parallel text, that visual can be a complementary text. So I can experiment with that visual in different ways. It depends on the training, it depends on the ideological baggage, it depends on the desire of the director or the people who make a theatre piece collaboratively. Because it's more collaboration than, as I said elsewhere, dictatorial direction. And here is the inauguration of a new scope, a new scopic regime, I would say. And this new scopic regime is predicated on technology that you can wish away. And this new scopic regime, scopic regime is also dependent on the new media that you cannot wish away either. And that brings the shock of the new. And in my abstract, I have referred to an old proverb that the evil enters the soul more through the eye than through the ear. So there may be, we are still, of course, very much in the middle of that fear, I can appreciate that. But we should be very confident because we are Indian theatre makers. I'm not a theatre maker, I'm not a scholar, I'm just an outsider, an intruder. Thanks to them, I'm here speaking before you. So when visual dramaturgy comes into operation, then you have the play of the optic, and the interpretation is by optical data, but not switching your brains off, not switching your other senses or your cognitive faculty off, right? The simultaneity of these performance languages is the beauty or the efficacy of the productions that have been made in recent times. And this visual dramaturgy may not operate in an isolationist manner, but may very well engage with the other languages or the other elements of theatre and performance. Now, when did it enter into our theatre making? And theatre making, I think I have time. And theatre making and performance making are also very different. Theatre making, we call them theatre makers. Usually in Paschim Banga, where I come from, West Bengal, right? Only Bengal remains, no west nor north, but still I'm from North Bengal, of West Bengal. So we call them Nattokormi in Bangla. That is theatre practitioners that you practice. The director is a practitioner, an actor is a practitioner, and the other workers in the theatre are also practitioners. But makers. Why makers? Because I think no one in the audience ignores Brecht, you like him or not. Brecht had his own leftist Marxist leanings, right? Leanings or affinities, a safer word maybe. And Brecht did not want to bring the theatre as a finished product onto the stage. Why? Because he was trying to take his audience into the process of making, the process of production. Work alienation, labor, finished product, market, those things are also there. Maybe it was not globalization in other guises, capitalism had always worked, right? And exploitation, subjugation, subordination, this dynamic was always there. So he wanted to expose theatrically here after Piscator in his epic theatre, and he thought this epicization of theatre is the solution, which is not, as we see today, that if I can show, expose the process of making, then the audience also gets to know how the theatre is made. And even the laborer, even the worker, even the peasants can also get to know how a product or a produce is also made. So all the emphasis is on the made, but not the made as it is marketed, not the made as you find them on the shelves in today's mall, but how it was made. So the element of labor, making, everything is there. Apart from the labor on the artistic, in the artistic domain. Into the Indian theatre and performance, it came, I would say, if I understand, okay fine, maybe I will do away with the slides. Because it came during the 1990s, I would say, especially through the women theatre makers. Sometimes I wonder, should we still use the label women theatre makers? Well, okay. But during the 1990s, yes, it's them who did it. Why? Because they wanted to speak, metaphorically speaking, in a different language. Speak in a different language because the realist, naturalist tradition, which had ruled the Indian theatre or the Indian stage over the past few decades before they made their entry into the theatre as directors, because they were only actors or worked in other capacities, not as directors. It was always a very difficult journey for all of them. Anuradha Kapur is here, Nilavan Singh Chaudhary is here, and the others are here and there. So they wanted to bring that visual element into their production at the same time. Let's see for the first time maybe, by pronouncing that visual element, how it works. It's not only the words or the sound that we hear, we would want to hear, we also like to see. And that is how, I believe, if I'm not wrong, that had begun. But then the Indian, if you call it the Indian post-dramatic, it has its own contexts and it is not imitative of the West at all, because I'm also working in that area. And if I can, with the chair's permission, I will show you, this is Anamika Haxa's, look her experimentation with space and how the once unified subject that the character was understood to be as is split up here into objects, into landscape details, etc. And the spectating, the whole history of spectating, she had radically changed, and it was a departure from the prevalent mode of theatre making, if that phrase is permissible. This is Mai Krishna Rao's Are You Home, Lady Macbeth, where Amitesh Grover also worked on the media. So she is reorganizing, retelling the story of that banquet scene from Shakespeare's Macbeth, and she's playing with her computer, and the computer also becomes a character, and you see the toy spoons, the paper roll, which would serve as a dining table, and she has collected texts and sequences from the original, the master quote-unquote original, and where in the original Lady Macbeth is at the center, and here you have a collage or a collation rather of those speeches or those texts or those directions where Lady Macbeth, which Lady Macbeth is playing with, playing around, playing on. It's very playful. She is speaking to herself, etc. And this is Abhilash Pillai's Midnight's Children, which Nilamji also referred to in her speech. You see, it's not only just a mindless mixing of the media and the live action, but this is more than a chapterification of history, because Salman Rushdie himself had the language of cinema in mind, especially of the Bollywood film industry in mind, right? How long cuts, short cuts, etc. So he also wanted to have this media language, because when you enter the auditorium, I mean after a journey, because the bioscope was outside the auditorium, then you as if feel that you are looking through the bioscope. Still you are looking through the bioscope, but the bioscope has turned into the modern day film. Almost a quick transition in the form of transformation. And this is Deepan Sivaraman's Ubu Roy. So the part of the sovereign, the words of the sovereign are tumbling out of his mouth, and the typist, sitting there on the chair, with him before him a desk on which the typewriter is, he is typing it out. So this is an exteriorization, materialization, visibilization, physicalization, right? The whole tribe of izations is there, and getting driven by the sovereign's guard on the motorcycle, the sound and the light, everything. So this is good scenography, which is not a decorative ornamental piece, but very integral to the function of the functionality of the production. This is Zuleika's Volkmann, where she put together the stage directions from the Ibsen text. Action, almost a mirroring of action, is happening on both sides of the stage with an acrylic scene in between. And the same structure, the same material, everything is retained in the next production. I forget the title. What is it? No. This is that was Volkmann, and this is the next production. I forget the title at the moment. It will come. No. This is performance. Extant space, propositions. Yeah, one of the series. One from the proposition series, where she solely focuses on the last scene of the Ibsen text, where snow falls, snow keeps falling, and Volkmann dies. So there are no performers, and the spectator is expected, demanded to be the performer. You have Zuleika's signature design with the tube lights and the corridors through which the spectator moves on. Yes, just half a minute, fine. And this is Anuradha Kapur's 40. It's a collaborative work with Vivan Sundaram. I can explain it in, this is from the Dark Things. which I liked very much. I watched it in Thrissur. And this is Mozamil Bhavani Hayat's, active space. Amitesh, were you the director? I mean, for a cinema here?
Teacher.
Teacher, right. So Mozamil did it. This is a fascinating piece, which also I can take up in the discussion because my time is up. Thank you very much for your questions.
Namaste. Thank you very much for inviting me, Abhilash Pillai and Santanu Bose for opening the doors of this beautiful school. Maybe technical for one in my life. Thank you very much, and it was very interesting to listen to everyone because I think we have so many subjects in common, and I agree with so many issues that you said, and we are in different points of the world and thinking about theater. It's really a celebration to be here. Also for me, it was very provocative, the title, New Visual Languages in Theater, and the first thing I thought is there are no new visual languages. Hopefully there are new qualities of artists, imaginations, and collaborations that bring us new work. I remember I was living in New York City in 1994, working with a production company in Lincoln Center organizing concerts, and my boss told me, I'm going to rent lighting equipment. It changes colors. Every spot has a motor and it changes colors, like 60 colors. And for me it was unbelievable, that every spot was able to change colors, and I imagine what you could do with that. So probably then I started to realize that the world was changing, and every year there was a new invention that surprised me. And theater, on the other side, it's the only thing that you cannot download from the internet. You go to the theater and you are there, and the interaction and the living with the audience, the actor and the audience living together, it's what remains the most important fact, So because I realized that I always say that if you know your town, you know the world. Usually I enjoy pieces of art that show a story from their own village, and people from another part of the world can understand that. And I see that you've been directing Federico Garcia Lorca, and I was so emotional about thinking that Garcia Lorca could be here. I always see the poster somewhere in the school, and other authors. And I look in my country, Uruguay. You have to check at night tonight where is Uruguay. It's in South America, very small country. For you it's a neighborhood, not even a province. We are 3.5 million people in the country, and in my city, Montevideo, we are 1.5 million. Half of the population lives in the capital city. But every night we have between 20 and 40 theater plays on stage. So it's a country that loves theater somehow. And we are ending the second decade of the 21st century. So when we talk about visual languages and new visual languages, we should also think about the phenomenon of globalization, and that the theater, it's probably one thing that it's characteristic of your place, and it's not easy to make theater part of the globalization movement. I mean, looking the same, it's not the same in India or in Uruguay or in France. You have things in common, of course, but it's interesting to see that it's also different. I want to show you at the end, because of technical problems, I put all the links at the end again. I want to show you what is going on in my country. I think there are two, I don't know, it doesn't look the same somehow, but it's I look in the artist right now in Uruguay, and I realize there are two phenomena that are interesting to talk about. One is autofiction, and the other one it's the one that Mariana Morena represents, that it's the getting in touch with the history, bringing a myth or somebody important from our history to the stage, and adapting the new world to the, connecting the history with the technology or the contemporary life. So, ella sobre ella, it means in English is her on her, or she on her. Someone that talks about her, or ella, or ella, it's her or she, and so it's ella about ella, okay? And it's about historical character, Carlota Ferreira. Carlota Ferreira, it's a woman at the end of the 19th century. She was a lover of a very famous painter in Uruguay, Blanes, and then he married the son of Blanes. So she did all kind of transgressive things for her era, and I think Mariana Morena tries to bring us the subject of the woman, the isolation of the woman that are advanced for her age, for the moment that they are alive, they're living. So this woman was in the end of 19th century. Montevideo was a very serious place. The protocol, the society lived with many rules, and suddenly this woman arrives. She has lovers. She is different. And Marianela, if I can show you later a few images, she takes that myth of Carlota Ferreira and organizes a play that deals with many things and also celebrates freedom on stage in a way, and erotism and freedom and transgression. Also, taking in consideration that at least our last year was full of feminism on stage, and the issue of the woman and the rights of the woman came up, I don't know, I think here also in India, and you could see that on stage also. So we will see a few things from this play. We will also see about autofiction. Actually, we can see that Sergio Blanco deals with autofiction. It means he deals with his own life, but not in a very realistic way. He starts from a point of view from his own experience, and he writes plays that deal with his life, but when you are in the audience, you never know when it's a lie, when it's true, if it's the life, Sergio Blanco's life, or if it's not. And he also manages to bring us many interesting issues from the world of mythology, of Greek mythology. If you see all the plays written by Sergio Blanco, you will probably see Greek myth, and also issues like family, homosexuality, relationship with the father. The father is always present, always getting murdered. So, let me see. Just a few images of El Bramillo de Düsseldorf, his last play, but the actor Gustavo Safores always plays Sergio Blanco. This is Walter playing the father, and they are in German, and Sergio Blanco was contacted by a pornographic company to write movies, and there are many issues, infinite issues, and just wanted to show you a few images. It deals also with the Holocaust, and Sergio Blanco, the character, wants to become Jewish, so it's very interesting, very complicated, and at the end, but also very clear and very enjoyable. He already this year he has 2 books on autofiction. I think it's very interesting. Then I went to see what's going on in the world and things that I was able to see, you know, the last years. I saw Ricci Forte from Italy. It's a group of physical theater, and Robert Lepage that just opened in France Kataka, a play dealing also with the history of Canada at the Theatre du Soleil. So it was also the controversy, it's called the controversy. Also the indigenous people in Canada were against the opening. I think it was cancelled in Canada. Then I thought about opera, because I love opera, and for instance, Robert Wilson did many, staged many operas from his point of view, and also are very interesting to see, and there many are in internet, La Traviata, Madama Butterfly, Turandot, past year in Spain. So this is, if you want to see what's going on in the world. So this is a scene, you know, from it's not, there's a visual problem between the computer and the projection. That's funny. Well, I don't know. I wanted just to go fast forward. You know, it's, I wanted to show you the Lepage, it's because I think Lepage is one of the authors and of directors, playwrights that gives a lot of thought to the visual aspect of his plays. I was able to see 2 or 3, and because, you know, I have, coming from a small country and always with budget problems, I have a situation with budgets, productions, and visual effects. You know, I don't want, I will leave you at the end my questions. I bring more questions than answers to this issue. And I think there is an issue between production and art and money, you know. So sometimes I see in my own country people that admire productions in countries that give a lot of money to art and culture. So it's, I think it's very important for an artist to understand the context where he is working and the possibilities, and also to go from there. And then I want to tell you a little bit about my background, my academic background. In the last 5 or 6 years since I was living in Spain, I started to study political science and political communication. And then I realized that I could go back to my theater roots, academic roots, and put something together. I was fascinated by the scenes in the parliaments, for instance, the beginning of the parliament season in England, or all the protocols and scenes and traditions that countries have in their own political system. I start to think about also how politics became very theatrical probably since it was mediatized, you know, since the media arrived, and between the politician and the audience came the TV. Many things start to be organized in a different way. And the spectacle and the political shows are amazing and are very interesting to watch. Sometimes you can get also scared when you see that in the United States a primary, for instance, costs $200 million. Okay, what could we do with $200 million? It's a lot of money only for one night, only to make that show that will be on TV. You know, when sometimes they bring, depends the party, but an important actor or somebody that organized something, but the show itself, the scenography, the lighting, everything is very costly. And also the politicians start to be in need of coaching sometimes to build a character. And also the counselors start to write storytellings to organize the communication between the world of politics and the world of voters. So the narrative, the storytelling, the building of our characters are my issues. I would like to show you something that happened a few days ago. I don't know what it is this. I hope it's this.
The state of our union is strong.
Look at the show, no? The characters, the
politics
audience,
of revenge,
the interaction.
resistance and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. Miracle is taking place in the
The
United
chorus
States.
of
And
woman,
the only thing
the
that can
chorus
stop
of woman in white.
are foolish wars, politics, or ridiculous partisan investigations. No one has benefited more from a thriving economy than women, who have filled 58% of the newly created jobs last year.
Those women are supposed to be against Trump, but the ego is stronger, you know? So they are.
You weren't supposed to do that. We also have more women serving in Congress than at any time before.
Better than a big tragedy. USA.
Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business. Right now, in my opinion, be in a major war with North Korea. But my relationship with Kim Jong-un is a good one. Kim and I will
The drone war is nothing.
again on February 27th and 28th in Vietnam. Here in the United States, we are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. We are born free and we will stay free.
Oh,
In the past, most of the people in this room voted for a wall, but the proper wall never got built. I will get it built.
one arrived, one. Okay. Half of the house applaud, half of the house doesn't. Actually, the whole State of the Union speech that it's also in internet, it's very interesting to watch and to observe the body language, the interaction with the audience, the applauses, the quotes, and the narrative, the storytelling. There is a part that it's not in the highlights where Trump says, because they always say, and today we say hello to, I don't know, to the kid that is sick, and or the hero of the
Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, my name is Shwarya. I am a student of MA Political Science, Delhi University. It was very enlightening presentations for me since I am a student from Political Science and it was very new. So I just wanted to ask you, what is the role of cinema in contributing to this new visual language in theatre? Is this new language, cinema has also contributed to this new language because cinema over a period of time has grown, has popular and people connect with it. So has theatre also, has it impacted theatre and did theatre also evolve due to this influence of cinema on people?
Yeah, definitely. As one of the medias which has sort of emerged quite strongly and popular, a lot of theatre practitioners have also responded to that kind of, because cinema is going to be popular, it is the popular of the times, and therefore what should theatre be? So there have been theatre practitioners who kind of respond and try to conceive of theatre practice as alternate to cinema, but also some others who would see this as a continuation of a certain kind of, say, a community, a society which is more kind of invested with new media practices as well as cinema. So that has changed our perceptions, a lot of people would say. So some of the practitioners would kind of say, since that has changed the perception, our attention, ways in which we are kind of engage with visuality, etc. Theatre might have to do something else, or theatre is a place where a different kind of perception is possible. That has also been a way in which people have responded. That's my estimation.
You have got to look into the different modes of making theatre and making cinema. Theatre may be taking, not exactly borrowing or imitating some of the elements from the medium of cinema. But in cinema, if you definitely know, if you think of how the shots are taken, how the acting is done, and then how the editing at the end of it all, or in the middle of the shows and the texts, happens, then you can easily figure out how this is a more immediate, direct engagement of the actors, of the director, of the body, of the movement, of the other players on the stage, right? With what you are articulating in your own way, and also the live relationship with the audience across. The line has broken down because it's more of a direct, more intimate relationship with the spectators, and the spectators also perform. They can also be, co-opted into the performance in different ways. So still, these are very, very different to my estimation.
Hello. I think also it's interesting, this projector, like this one, when it appears in the theater world, I think it gave a lot. And I find, for instance, in the Lepage piece about Canada, and in Sergio Blanco pieces, they use a lot the mock documentary. You suddenly see someone in an interview, but it was done for the theater play. It's not a real interview. It's not a real documentary. But it's like theater inside theater inside theater, using the video artist as a collaborator. Thank you.
Thank you all the panelists for the very insightful lectures. My name is Aniket and I'm a folklore researcher from Jawaharlal Nehru University. It was quite interesting in sense of the sensory perception, like how we have moved away from, so to say, visual to new visual. And same sort of deliberations have been made in the field of philosophy by Jack Goody and all, where they talk of anthropology of senses. So I'm curious to know, theatre since its very inception has been very synesthetic when it comes to the senses. So what brought us all, like you panelists and us scholars, to deliberate on new visual language in theatre? Thank you. what is the need of this new visual language in theatre? It has always been, so to say, very synesthetic. So what is the need of this new visual language in theatre?
Yeah, synesthetic, definitely. But the character of that synesthesia has changed over time, depending on the entry of the other visual media or mediums, languages into the world of performance. And that world of performance is as diverse as texts once upon a time were, or the modes of acting, styles of acting were. So, synesthetic fine, but because theatre has ever been a composite art, right? You, in the sense of composite, wanted to mean the synesthetic. But perception was there, but we relied more on cognition, right? The instant translation of the image that you see on the stage or in the performance space into interpretation. But that pace and dynamic of interpretation has changed over the years. So maybe there may be a much longer answer referring to our own, I'm a little uncomfortable about using the word indigenous or nativist, our own aesthetics at the same time, aesthetics as a mode of representation in, once again, if you allow me to use the blanket term Western, the Western world.
Okay. Maybe a short response from a very different angle also, which having come up in the paper, but also the question of vision itself, not just actually visual language. Vision itself, I would say, has become quite significant in a place like India from, say, late 60s to 1970s for both artists and practitioners, writers, as also quite a lot of state practices, I would say. So, because vision, in a certain sense of transparency, of seeing through, of kind of seeing through the chaos and what we see as, say, the emergency discourse, of seeing through, as is also has a philosophical kind of base. And some of the responses of theatrical playing with the vision, playing with transparency and opaqueness is also a peculiar critique of this sort of new neoliberal regime that we kind of entered over the thing. So it has a larger kind of centrality of vision and kind of playing with it and kind of destabilizing it is also larger political process.
कि 2 घंटे में हमने प्रोग्रेस को देखा। नीलम मानसिंह जी ने इंडियन थिएटर कैसे प्रोग्रेस हुआ है वो सुनाया, मगर प्रॉब्लम को नहीं दिखाया। प्रॉब्लम ड्रामा स्कूल के शुरुआत में ही था। ड्रामा स्कूल के शुरुआत में 20 भाषाओं के 25 भाषाओं के लोग यहाँ आके एक भाषा में काम करने लगे थे, वो प्रॉब्लम थे। आज वो प्रॉब्लम 100 गुना बढ़ गया है। मैं शुरुआत में हिंदी से गुस्सा था, क्योंकि मैं कन्नड़ का था और हिंदी भाषा में मुझे नाटक करना पड़ रहा। अब तो मैं हिंदी वालों के साथ हूँ, क्योंकि वो भी पीछे हट गए हैं। सब कल्चर, सब भाषा पीछे हट गए। समस्या बढ़ गया है। समस्या ये है कि 80% थिएटर वाले अपने भाषा से, अपने संस्कृति से, अपने तकनीक से, अपने प्लेराइट से खुश है। सिर्फ 10% या 5% लोग उस भाषा से, उससे अनहैप्पी है और उस वजह से वो मल्टीकल्चरलिज्म सोचा है और दूसरे भाषा को सोच रहे हैं। मैं क्या करूं? मैं जो गांव में रहता हूं, मैं गांव में रहना चाहता हूं और मुझे मेरा एक्टर चाहिए। मुझे मेरा एक्टर इसलिए चाहिए, my actor is the cheapest thing and the most beautiful thing available to me in a village. Set is very expensive for me. Scenography is very expensive for me. मुझे मेरे भाषा में नाटककार अवेलेबल है, वो मेरे पास आके लिखने के लिए तैयार है, उनको मेरा गांव मालूम है, तो मुझे ये मल्टीकल्चरलिज्म से प्रॉब्लम होता है। नीलम जी ने जो हिस्ट्री यहाँ कंस्ट्रक्ट किया, बहुत अच्छे ढंग से कंस्ट्रक्ट किया, वो हिस्ट्री शुरू होता है अनुराधा कपूर से और एंड होता है मिस्टर पिल्ले से। I have no problem with that, and I am very proud to be eliminated from this history. But this history is the history of the 90% of India, 90% of the Indian people, not just in India, but all over the world. So we have to seriously think of the problem. The problem that was constructed by Kamaladevi Chattopadhyaya has now become 1000-fold stronger. The problem constructed by Alkazi has become stronger. Alkazi पीछे हट गए हैं, कमला देवी जी पीछे हट गए हैं, मोहन राकेश जी पीछे हट गए हैं, गिरीश कार्नाड जी पीछे हट गए हैं. We have to seriously think. I don't think we can just celebrate the new visual language. The new visual language was brought by global market. The new visual, and interestingly, one who made some remarks, critical remarks, was the foreigner. विदेशी आके हमें बता रहे हैं कि उसमें प्रॉब्लम है, न्यू विजुअल लैंग्वेज में प्रॉब्लम है. कैसे न्यू विजुअल लैंग्वेज को ट्रम्प इस्तेमाल कर रहा है. हमारे देश के ट्रम्प भी, हमारे देश के थिएटर लोग भी इसको इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं. सिर्फ बुद्धिजीवी लोगों को ये दिखाई नहीं दे रहा है. बुद्धिजीवी लोग नए नए भाषा, very interesting English language words they have, and they're going with it. I think we have to seriously look at how are we going to handle this 85-90% of the theatre people who are left out of this game. They're seriously left out. They have no place. What do we do with them? They can only do their theatre in Kannada. They can only do their politics in Kannada. They can only do their life in Kannada. Why are we having Kashmir problem? Why are we having terrorist problem? What is the politics of the last 40 years of this country? The politics is of identity, the politics of culture, the politics is of the isolation of the Indian from the Indian languages, Indian cultures and all that. Why is right wing coming into this country? What is the answer of the new visual language to the right wing? What is the answer of the new visual language to Trump, who is so blatantly telling lies and gets away with it? Because he, after telling all these lies, he is saying, I am with you. Is Trump really with the Americans? Is the right wing in India really with the Indians? There are very serious issues. I think we should take up those issues. Thank you.
Hi, I'm not going to answer to everything because I didn't understand. But looking at you, I just want to remind me and everybody that theater is the police. Theater is still the police. Theater is still a place where we encounter with the other. And we a moment of exchange of ideas. That's what I feel, having understand 10% of what you said, looking at you, and looking and thanks for having understand something that I wanted to say from my place. Theater could be very expensive or very cheap. Grotowski was not so cheap, and his best book is Poor Theater, and it wasn't so cheap. His work, believe me, Poland had more money than Uruguay for theater. So I'm coming from the poor theater of Grotowski, but the real one. And you can do theater with nothing. The important thing is to remember that theater is the police. Theater, it's a place of encounter. So you do what you want, I do what I want, he does what he wants. There is no one way to do theater.
There is, thanks God, there is no one way to do politics. If not, we were in trouble. Thank you.
Sir, with due respect to what you said, I can fully appreciate your sentiment, your argument, strong logic, and your love for the theatre. So first of all, I'm really a very odd presence here, but still, I think on behalf of all, I can reassure you that you have not been eliminated. You have built this institution brick by brick with the others. So, but as a guru, I'm sure you'd love to see your students, your disciples grow up. You would like them to have their freedom to speak, their freedom to show the way they want, as Mariana just said. And India is a land of diversity, diverse cultures. Now, how do we engage or deal with this diversity? I have a little problem. I apologize for having this problem with the word multiculturalism. Multiculturalism came to the United States in the 1980s, and it had encountered huge problems because the multicultural mosaic did not work for one thing, because it also had a homogenizing tendency. That as a way of tokenism, you accept the difference, because from Zangwill's melting pot, the natural progression was multiculturalism. But when you recognize the diversity and the difference of the others, but then when you put them into a fold, because that is how politics operates, then that also develops its own part of language by homogenizing the whole group. Today is the time of the politics of difference, because this politics of difference, you recognize the other not as an extension of the self, not as an extension of what so long has constituted that unity in diversity. What if we just make things stand on their head and try to see as performers how the things perform by themselves, within themselves, that there is diversity in unity too? So, a new approach to theatre making, and there are many languages, there are many. Sir, I'm small fry before you. I feel ashamed of speaking before you, so I can't even look you in the eye. You can easily study my physical, my physical language, my body language. Yes, you are an ocean. But the problem is so that the way one thing should be done in one space, it may have a language of its own. And another thing which is very important to me personally, with my limited knowledge and understanding of course, is that even when we have our own history of image making in India, and I am very critical of any excesses, because I do not believe in the kind of thing that anything goes in theatre, because we have also our own image, own history and tradition of image making. But what if I let it interact with the other languages? That certainly wouldn't be globalization. And this
I'm precisely talking of that. I'm precisely talking about it. Why did you not mention Utpal Dutt, Badal Sarkar? Why did you not mention Rudra Prasad? Why was the history completely eliminated? One minute. Why did, for example, you not discuss Shankar Pilla? You see, you have to discuss Shankar Pilla and relate your theatre with Shankar Pilla. I have to relate my theatre with Al-Qazi Saab. I have to relate my theatre with Karanji. आपने कोई उसको नहीं किया, उसके बारे में मैं बोल रहा हूँ. मैं डाइवर्सिटी को बिल्कुल मानता हूँ, डाइवर्सिटी के खिलाफ नहीं हूँ मैं.
This is, I think, unfortunately, this is the end of the session. But what is very fortunate is that the fact that we have been able to open this and talk about it, and I take this point that it is about an encounter, it is about conversation to say, I don't agree. And I think that's very important. and at least let us open that to say I don't agree, or saying 20 times over I agree. So let us keep this discussion open and the spirit of the discussion as a discussion. We will have to close. I want to thank very warmly.
No, Radhaji, we want to listen your opinion, please.
My job is not the opinion. My job is moderating. And when you want to listen
Can
to
I-
my opinion, I'll be very happy to do it.
Can I, would you like to listen to a younger opinion, sir? Thank you. In this, my name is Ameet Grover, sir. I respect you a lot and have learned from you a lot. In the spirit of the seminar and its framing of disagreement, I disagree with everything that Prasanna ji has proposed. And I'm also, as a young person, I also feel very oppressed and quite fearful of the way that we are often talked down to. I would want to make two things. I would want to propose two things here. One is that every single name that Prasanna ji has spoken of, we have read them. We have imbibed values from them as theatre makers and as theatre directors and actors. I think what we are in the moment of historicizing another moment of history here in this seminar. We do not necessarily have to pay respects to history every time we are in a seminar. I am thankful to the speakers to not having gone back to the Greek times every time that they have come to present an idea. It has been a very enriching experience for us. And also that most of the names that have been taken during the seminar of theatres that we have watched recently have happened in their own languages. Theatres of Malayalam, theatres in Punjabi, theatres in Bangla. And a lot of young people who have been mentioned are young people who are working in their own towns and in their own villages right now, with a new definition, with a new practice, with a new spirit. I think this is a moment for us to understand this change. ये बदलाव जो हो रहा है इसको थोड़ा समझने की ज़रूरत है. I thank the speakers for making us understand, at least guiding us to express, to be able to share, and also to agree and disagree. Thank you.
Can I just say something? Just a bit. I'll just take 1 minute.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Because the next session has to start.
Amitesh ji, right? So my name is Aishwarya, and I'm a student of Arts and Aesthetics. I studied theatre and performance studies, and I agreed with what sir had to say, and I kind of want to have an argument about what you had to say, because you said that it's time that we look at something new. It's time that we look at something which is contemporary, which is fine. Yeah, I mean, we have to look at it. We have to consider it. I think working on the contemporary is very important. However, when we say that it was history and let's not talk about it, that's not how we humans work, right? No, but he said that let's see right now.
Aishwarya, we'll have to stop because it's the next session, and let us take this opportunity. It's an invitation to talk outside. Yes. Thank you very much.
I request Senior Faculty of National School of Drama, Associate Professor of Acting, Ms. Seema Singh ji, to kindly come onto the stage and felicitate the chair and the panelists for this session. Panelists, I request you all to kindly come on stage.
I am pursuing my PhD in food studies. So for me it was very interesting.
Ameet Parameswaran ji.
I am looking at
Ameet Parameswaran ji, Professor Ashish, kindly come on stage.
It's a good thing.
I'm gonna just after what I'm trying to talk about my work, and it's very much beneficial.
Please make a note, because of the shortage of time, it has already been served in the auditorium, and there shall be no break.
1960
we shall go on to the next session.
and it's developed post 1945. So this new visual and new synesthetic is very much important to my thing.
Can we please go on to the next session? I request the audience to kindly settle down.
Okay, 1960.